500,000. The bid hung in the stagnant air of the underground warehouse, thick with the scent of cheap cigar smoke, unwashed bodies, and the metallic tang of fear. Madison Pierce didn't flinch. She couldn't. The silver-laced handcuffs binding her wrists behind her back burned against her skin, a constant, stinging reminder of her reality. She stood on the raised wooden platform, the harsh spotlight blinding her, turning the sea of faces in the dark into a blur of hungry shadows. She was 23 years old, an alpha's daughter, and tonight she was item number 13. 600,000, a voice shouted from the left. A heavy, wet cough followed. 750, another yelled, aggressive and fast. Madison's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. She looked down, her eyes finding the one face she wanted to avoid but couldn't ignore. Marcus Pierce, her father, the alpha of the Silver Creek pack. He was on his knees at the edge of the stage, blood trickling from a broken nose, held down by 2 enforcers from the Red Fang Syndicate. He looked pathetic, broken. "Please," Marcus wheezed, looking toward the auctioneer, a greasy wolf named Varg. She's pure, never been mated, she's a college degree, she's worth more than this." Madison bit the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. "Shut up," she screamed internally. "Just shut up, Dad." 3 days ago, she had been working on her graphic design portfolio. 2 days ago, Red Fang enforcers had kicked down their front door. And now, she learned her father's gambling debt wasn't just a few thousand. It was $5 million, a debt he had tried to pay with territory, and when that failed, he offered his own flesh and blood. 800,000 going once, Varg shouted, ignoring Marcus's pleading. "Do I hear $1 million for the Alpha bloodline?" 1.2 million, a slurred voice called out. It belonged to an old, lecherous beta from a rogue pack. Madison felt bile rise in her throat. The room buzzed. That was a high price for a debt slave. Varg raised his gavel, a twisted grin on his face. 1.2 million owing once, going twice? The gavel began to descend. Madison squeezed her eyes shut, preparing for the end of her life. 10 million. The voice didn't shout. It didn't need to. It cut through the noise of the room like a blade of ice, deep, resonant, and radiating a power so suffocating that the air in the warehouse seemed to drop 10 degrees instantly. Silence slammed into the room. Absolute, terrified silence. Madison opened her eyes. From the back of the room, in the VIP shadows where the light didn't reach, a figure stood up. The other wolves in the vicinity scrambled away, clearing a wide circle around him as if his very presence was contagious. He walked into the light. He was massive, taller than any Alpha Madison had ever seen, with shoulders that strained against a black, bespoke suit. His hair was dark as ink, swept back. But it was his face that stole the breath from her lungs. He was devastatingly handsome, with sharp, aristocratic cheekbones and a jawline that could cut glass, but a jagged pale scar ran vertically down his left cheek, marring the perfection, making him look dangerous, lethal. And his eyes, they were amber, glowing faintly with the inner beast, fixated entirely on her. "Who is that?" someone whispered, their voice trembling. "That's him," another murmured, "the immortal beast." Lysander Kane. Madison's knees nearly buckled. Every wolf knew the stories. The alpha of the Nightfall territory. The tyrant who supposedly slaughtered an entire council during the Civil War 10 years ago. A man who didn't run a pack. He ran an empire of violence. Varg, the auctioneer, swallowed hard, his arrogance vanishing. A bid of 10 million from Alpha Kane. Does anyone dare to challenge? Silence. No one was stupid enough to bid against death itself. "Sold!" Varg squeaked, slamming the gavel down quickly, as if afraid Lysander might change his mind. She is yours, Alpha." Lysander didn't look at the auctioneer. He didn't look at the trembling crowd. He walked straight to the stage, his movements fluid and predatory. He stopped right in front of Madison. Up close, he smelled of rain, expensive scotch, and raw, terrifying power. He didn't speak to her. He simply reached out a large hand. Madison flinched, expecting a blow. Instead, his fingers calloused and warm brushed her chin, forcing her to look up at him. The contact sent a jolt of electricity down her spine, shocking and hot. "Unlock her," Lysander commanded. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated in her chest. Varg scrambled over with the key. Click, click. The heavy silver cuffs fell away. Madison rubbed her raw wrists, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She looked at her father. Marcus was weeping now, relief washing over his bruised face. "Thank you." Alpha Cain, Marcus sobbed. "Thank you for clearing the debt. She's a good girl. She'll serve you well." Lysander turned his head slowly, looking down at Marcus like he was a stain on the floor. "I didn't buy her to save you, Marcus," Lysander said, his tone devoid of emotion. "I bought her because I own everything you have, your land, your money, and now your legacy." He turned back to Madison, his amber eyes darkening. He offered her his arm, a gentleman's gesture from a monster. "Come," he said. It wasn't a request. Madison hesitated for a split second, looking at the exit, then at her useless father, then at the predator waiting for her. She had no choice. She placed her trembling hand on his forearm. The muscle beneath the suit jacket was hard as rock. "Good girl," he murmured, the praise sounding dark and twisted. Outside, the night air was cool, but it did nothing to calm Madison's feverish skin. A sleek black limousine idled in the alleyway. A driver held the door open. Madison slid into the leather interior, pressing herself into the far corner. Lysander followed, his large frame filling the space, instantly making the luxury car feel like a prison cell. The door shut, sealing them in silence. The partition was up. They were alone. Madison hugged her arms around her chest, trying to stop the shivering. Are you going to kill me?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lysander poured a glass of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. He took a slow sip, watching her over the rim of the glass. He looked calm, almost bored. But Madison could feel the intensity of his gaze tracing every inch of her face, her neck, her collarbone. "If I wanted you dead, Madison, I wouldn't have paid $10 million, he said smoothly. He set the glass down and leaned forward. The shift in his posture was subtle, yet suddenly he felt much closer. "Then what do you want?" she asked, trying to summon a shred of the alpha blood she possessed. "Am I a servant? A breeder?" Lysander let out a short, dry laugh. It lacked humor. A breeder, no. That would be too simple. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick document. He tossed it onto the seat between them. "Marriage contract, non-negotiable." Madison stared at the bold letters, her mind reeling. She looked up at him, confusion warring with fear. "Marriage? You want to marry me?" "I don't want to do anything," Lysander corrected, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. He slid across the leather seat until he was inches from her. Madison stopped breathing. He was too close. The scent of him, rain and dominance, flooded her senses, making her wolf pace anxiously inside her mind. He was terrifying. Yes, but there was a magnetic pull, a biological response she couldn't suppress. He reached out, his hand sliding behind her neck, his thumb resting on the pulse point of her throat. His touch was firm, possessive, yet strangely careful. He wasn't hurting her, but he was trapping her. "Your father didn't just owe money, Madison," Lysander said softly, leaning in until his lips were brushing against her ear. "He owes a debt of blood, a debt from the past." Madison shivered as his warm breath ghosted over her sensitive skin. She felt his nose graze her hairline, inhaling deeply, scenting her. It was an intimate, primal act that made her toes curl in her shoes. "You have 48 hours," he whispered against her skin, sending goosebumps down her arms. 48 hours for what she choked out, her heart pounding so hard she thought he must be able to feel it against his fingertips. Lysander pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. His pupils were blown wide, black swallowing the amber. "To prepare," he said, his thumb stroking the soft skin of her neck, a stark contrast to the cruelty of his words. "We will be married at my estate. You will be the Luna of nightfall. You will wear my mark. You will bear my name." Why tears pricked her eyes? Why me? His expression hardened, the momentary heat in his eyes replaced by something ancient and cold. "Because," he said, releasing her and leaning back into the shadows of his seat, "you are the final piece of a puzzle I've been trying to solve for 20 years, and you look exactly like the woman who destroyed me." Madison froze. "Read the contract, pet," Lysander commanded, closing his eyes as the car sped into the night. "You belong to the beast now." The limousine didn't just drive. It prowled through the dense fog that blanketed the nightfall territory. For the last hour, Madison had pretended to read the contract, but the words blurred into legal gibberish. Her mind was stuck on Lysander's face the way the scar distorted his perfection, the haunted emptiness in his amber eyes. "You look exactly like the woman who destroyed me." Who was she? And why did that comparison make a shiver of dread and something dangerously like curiosity crawl up her spine? The car slowed. "We're here," Lysander said. He hadn't looked at her since the pet comment. He stared out the window, his jaw clenched so hard a muscle ticked beneath his skin. Madison looked out. Her breath hitched. Blackthorn Manor wasn't a house. It was a fortress carved from obsidian stone, rising out of the mountain like a jagged tooth. It was magnificent and terrifying, surrounded by ancient pines that seemed to whisper warnings in the wind. There were no flower gardens, no welcoming lights, just towering spires and gargoyles that looked too much like real wolves frozen in stone. The car stopped. The door opened. A man was waiting for them at the bottom of the massive stone steps. He was younger than Lysander, with sandy blonde hair and a kind, albeit weary, face. This was Callum, the beta. "Alpha." Callum greeted with a bow of his head. He looked at Madison, his eyes widening slightly, and this must be her. Lysander stepped out, his presence instantly dominating the courtyard. "Get her inside. Callum, show her to the master suite. I have business to attend to." He didn't say goodbye. He didn't offer a hand. He simply turned and stalked toward the darkness of the surrounding woods, shedding his suit jacket as he went. He looked like a man hunting for violence to calm his blood. Madison stood shivering in her thin white dress. Miss Pierce Callum's voice was gentle. "Please, it's freezing out here." "Madison," she corrected automatically, wrapping her arms around herself. "Just Madison. I don't think I have a title anymore." Callum offered a sympathetic, tight-lipped smile. "You'd be surprised. Come, I'll show you the cage before the lion returns." The interior of Blackthorn Manor was a masterpiece of Gothic gloom. High vaulted ceilings, tapestries depicting wars from centuries ago, and fireplaces large enough to roast a whole stag. It smelled of wood smoke and old paper. Callum led her up a winding marble staircase. "He's not always like this," Callum said quietly, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. The war changed him. The betrayal changed him. "He said I look like someone," Madison probed, watching Callum's reaction. The beta stiffened. He stopped walking and turned to her. The kindness in his eyes vanished, replaced by a stern warning. "Listen to me, Madison. If you want to survive here, there are rules. Lysander isn't just an alpha. He's a broken creature held together by rage. Don't poke the wound." He handed her a folded piece of heavy parchment. What is this? The laws of Blackthorn. Callum sighed. Memorize them. Madison unfolded the paper. Her eyes scanned the list. Your presence is mandatory at all public events. Do not speak of the past. Do not leave the castle grounds without an escort. Wifely duties are expected upon demand. Madison felt sick at the fourth rule, but her eyes snagged on the first one, written in bold, aggressive ink. Do not enter the East Wing. What's in the East Wing? She asked. Callum's expression darkened. Ghosts, pain, the things that turned a man into a monster. Stay away from there. Madison, I'm serious. The last woman who wandered there. He trailed off, shaking his head. Just don't. He opened a set of double doors at the end of the hall. Your room. You have until dawn to rest. The ceremony is at sunrise. Sunrise came too fast. Madison hadn't slept. She had spent the night pacing the opulent room, which felt less like a bedroom and more like a mausoleum. At 5:00 a.m., the door opened. 3 maids entered silently, carrying not a white dress, but a gown of midnight black silk and lace. It was stunning, intricately beaded, but the message was clear. This wasn't a celebration of love. It was a mourning of her freedom. They dressed her in silence when they finished. Madison looked in the mirror. The black dress hugged her curves like a second skin, the corset bodice pushing her breasts up, the dark fabric making her pale skin look almost translucent. She looked beautiful. She looked like a sacrifice. It is time, Callum said from the doorway. He looked sad. They walked down to the ritual chamber in the basement of the castle. There were no flowers, no music, just stone walls, flickering torches, and the smell of burning sage and iron. Only 3 people were present as witnesses, Callum and 2 elderly wolves with cloudy eyes, the pack elders. And him. Lysander stood at the altar. He had cleaned up since the night before. He wore a black ceremonial tunic open at the collar, revealing the hard muscles of his chest. His hair was damp. When Madison entered, Lysander turned. The air shifted. Madison felt the weight of his gaze physically. It raked over her body, lingering on the exposed curve of her cleavage, then snapping up to her eyes for a second. Just a second. The cold mask slipped, and she saw raw, starving hunger. She walked the aisle alone. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. I can't do this. I can't. But then she remembered her father's terrified face, the debt. She stopped in front of him. He was so tall she had to crane her neck. Do you, Lysander Kane, claim this wolf, the elder croaked. I claim what is mine, Lysander replied, his voice a deep baritone that vibrated through the stone floor. Do you, Madison Pierce, submit to the bond? Madison hesitated. Her throat felt like it was full of glass. Lysander stared at her, his expression unreadable, but his hands were clenched into fists at his sides. She swallowed. I submit. Then seal it in blood. Lysander stepped closer. The heat radiating off him was intoxicating. He reached out, his large hand cupping the back of her neck, his fingers tangled in her hair, forcing her head to the side, exposing the tender column of her throat. This will hurt, he whispered. It was the first thing he'd said to her all morning. It sounded like an apology. Before she could respond, he lowered his head. Madison gasped as she felt his hot breath against her pulse. Then, snap. His canines elongated, and he sank his teeth into the crook of her shoulder, right where the mating gland lay dormant. Ah, Madison cried out, her knees buckling. Pain, sharp and white-hot, exploded through her body, but instantly. It was followed by a flood of endorphins, a rush of power that wasn't hers. It was him. She felt his strength, his darkness, the ancient power of his alpha blood flooding her veins, knitting their souls together with a violent, irrevocable snap. He didn't let go. He drank from her, his tongue lapping at the wound, soothing the sting even as he deepened the claim. It was savage. It was intimate. Madison involuntarily grabbed his tunic, her nails digging into his chest. A moan escaped her lips, part pain, part confused pleasure. Lysander groaned against her skin, the vibration traveling straight to her core. He pulled back slowly, his lips stained with her blood. His eyes were glowing a bright, feral gold. He ran a thumb over the bite mark, sealing the wound with his saliva. "Done," he rasped, his voice rougher than before. "You are bound." The wedding feast was non-existent. The witnesses left. It was just the two of them in the master suite. The sun had set again. The atmosphere in the room was suffocating. Madison stood by the fireplace, still in her black wedding dress. The bite on her shoulder throbbed, a constant reminder that he was in her head now. She could feel a low-level hum of his emotions, agitation, exhaustion, and regret. The door locked with a heavy thud. Lysander walked in. He had discarded the ceremonial tunic and wore only loose lounge pants. His chest was bare, a landscape of scars and muscle. Madison stiffened. Rule number 4, wifely duties. She backed up until she hit the cold stone mantelpiece. Lysander poured himself a drink. He downed it in one go. Then he turned to her. He walked closer, crowding her space, placing his hands on the mantelpiece on either side of her head, caging her in. He smelled of whiskey and fresh blood, her blood. "So," he murmured, leaning down until their noses almost touched. "You've read the rules. You know what happens tonight." Madison trembled, but she lifted her chin. She refused to cower. "Get it over with, then." Lysander's eyes narrowed. He traced the line of her jaw with his knuckle, his touch searing. He lowered his gaze to her lips, then down to the heaving swell of her breasts in the corset. The sexual tension was thick enough to choke on. The air crackled with the energy of the bond, urging them to mate, to complete the cycle. Madison squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for his hands, his weight. But he didn't touch her. Instead, he let out a harsh, bitter laugh and pushed himself away from the wall. "Look at you," he sneered, turning his back on her, trembling like a leaf. Disgusting. Madison's eyes snapped open. "Excuse me?" "I don't rape unwilling prisoners, Madison," Lysander said coldly, walking toward the window. "And I certainly don't bed women who look at me like I'm a monster." "You bought me," she yelled, the adrenaline finally making her snap. "You marked me. You made me sign a contract about duties." "Protection," he shot back, spinning around. "That contract protects you from my pack. If they think you're my true mate, they won't tear you apart. If they think I claim you nightly, they will fear you." He walked to a chaise lounge near the balcony and sat down, turning his face away from her. "Go to sleep, Madison. The bed is yours. I won't touch you." Madison stood there, confused, her body humming with unspent energy and the weird phantom rejection of the bond. Why, she whispered, why go through all this? Lysander looked out at the moonlit forest, his profile sharp and lonely. "Because when I look at you," his voice broke, just for a fraction of a second, before turning to steel again. "When I look at you, I see a ghost, and I can't fuck a ghost." He closed his eyes. "Just don't talk, and for God's sake, don't go to the East Wing." 3 days later, Madison learned that silence was heavier than screaming. She sat on a velvet chair slightly behind Lysander's massive ebony throne in the pack hall. The room was filled with 30 of the pack's highest-ranking wolves. The air smelled of wet fur, aggression, and fear. Madison kept her chin up, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. She was the Luna, but she felt like an ornament, a trophy wife for a man who hated her face. The border skirmishes with the Southern rogues are increasing. "Alpha," a burly enforcer named Thorne growled. Stepping forward, he glanced at Madison with undisguised contempt. "They smell weakness. They know you have taken a mate from a bankrupt bloodline. The room went dead silent. Thorn had just insulted the Alpha's decision. Lysander didn't shout. He was lounging in his throne, looking bored, twirling a silver ring on his finger. Weakness, Lysander repeated softly. In a blur of motion too fast for Madison to track, Lysander was out of his chair. He had Thorn pinned against the stone pillar by the throat before the enforcer could blink. "Do you think," Lysander whispered, his voice echoing in the silent hall, "that acquiring a wife has made me soft, Thorn?" Thorn clawed at Lysander's hand, gagging, his eyes bulging. No, Alpha." Lysander tightened his grip. "Madison Pierce is not a weakness. She is my property, and if you disrespect what is mine, you disrespect me." He threw Thorn to the ground like a rag doll. Lysander straightened his cuffs, his face impassive. He turned back to the room. Next grievance. He didn't look at Madison, but as he sat back down, the mating bond between them that invisible, nagging tether pulsed with a dark wave of possessiveness. It wasn't love. It was territorial instinct, and despite her hatred for him, Madison felt a treacherous flush of heat spread through her chest. That night, the bond took its toll. Madison woke up shivering, her sheets soaked in sweat. Her body was rejecting the forced mating mark, or perhaps fighting the overwhelming surge of alpha power Lysander had pumped into her veins. She groaned, curling into a ball. Her bones ached. Her head felt like it was splitting open. The door to her suite creaked open. Lysander stood there, silhouetted by the hall light. He didn't sleep. He prowled the castle at night like a restless ghost. "You're too loud," he said from the doorway, his voice gruff. "I can hear your heart racing from the other end of the hall. It's annoying." "Go away," Madison rasped, her teeth chattering. "I'm dying." Lysander walked into the room. He didn't leave. He approached the bed, his brow furrowed. He sat on the edge of the mattress dipping under his weight. "You're not dying. It's the reject's fever. Your human side is fighting the alpha blood." He reached out. Madison flinched, but she was too weak to move away. He placed the back of his hand against her forehead. His skin was cool, a stark contrast to her burning flesh. The contact sent a jolt of relief through her. She leaned into his touch involuntarily, letting out a soft whimper. Lysander froze, his amber eyes locked onto hers in the darkness. For a moment, the cruelty vanished. He looked tortured. "Why?" Madison whispered, delirious with fever. "Why is it so painful?" "Because we aren't real," Lysander murmured, his thumb brushing away a bead of sweat from her temple. His voice was unusually soft, devoid of its usual jagged edge. "A true bond heals. A forced bond burns. We are both burning, Madison." He stood up abruptly, breaking the contact. The loss of his touch made her ache. He walked to the bathroom, soaked a cloth in cold water, and returned. He wiped her face, her neck, the pulse points of her wrists. His movements were clinical, efficient, yet undeniably gentle. "Sleep," he commanded, "if you die. My investment is wasted." It was a cruel thing to say, but his hand lingered on her shoulder for a second too long before he pulled away. 2 days later, the fever broke. Madison felt stronger, but the boredom was killing her. Lysander was gone on patrol. Callum was busy. The castle was empty. Rule number 1, do not enter the East Wing. Madison stood at the intersection of the hallways, to the left, the safety of her room, to the right, a heavy oak door bound by thick silver chains. The chains were strange. Silver-burned werewolves. Why would an alpha use silver in his own home unless he wanted to keep something or someone wolf-like inside? Curiosity, that fatal flaw, won. Madison approached the door. The lock was old, but the silver chains were loose enough to slip through if she was careful. She squeezed through the gap, the metal hissing slightly as it grazed her arm. Inside, the east wing was freezing. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light cutting through boarded-up windows. It wasn't a dungeon, it was a living space frozen in time. She walked past covered furniture, a grand piano with a layer of dust, a vase of dead, black roses that had crumbled into powder on a table. Then she heard it. A sound, not a ghost, but a memory echoing in the walls. Or maybe someone real. She followed the hallway to a large set of double doors, a library. She pushed them open. The room was magnificent, filled with books, but dominated by a massive fireplace. Above the fireplace hung a painting covered by a heavy velvet drape. Madison walked toward it. Her heart thumped in her ears. She reached up and gripped the velvet fabric. With a sharp tug, she pulled it down. Dust swirled. The cloth hit the floor. Madison gasped, stumbling back, her hand flying to her mouth. The woman in the painting was standing in a field of lavender. She wore a white sundress. Her hair was the same shade of chestnut brown as Madison's. Her eyes were the same hazel green. Her smile shy, slightly crooked, was Madison's smile. It was like looking in a mirror. Except for the date painted in the corner 20 years ago, and the man standing next to her in the painting, a younger, happier Lysander, his face unscarred, his eyes full of light and adoration. There was a small brass plaque at the bottom of the frame. Madison stepped closer, squinting to read the script. Celeste Moreau, my moon, my curse. I told you not to come here. The voice was a thunderclap. Madison spun around. Lysander stood in the doorway of the library. He wasn't wearing his suit. He was covered in mud and blood from the patrol, his chest heaving, his claws extended. But it was his face that terrified her. He wasn't just angry, he was shattered. He looked from Madison to the painting and back again, his eyes wide with a horrific mixture of longing and hatred. Madison stammered, pointing at the painting. She's me. That's why you bought me. Lysander crossed the room in 3 strides. He grabbed Madison by the shoulders, slamming her back against the wall, not hard enough to break bones, but hard enough to knock the wind out of her. You are not her, he roared, his voice cracking. You are a shadow, a cheap copy. Who is she? Madison yelled back, adrenaline overriding her fear. Is she my mother? My sister? Tell me. Lysander's grip tightened. He was shaking. He lowered his face until he was inches from hers, his amber eyes swirling with madness. She was the love of my life, he snarled, the words tearing out of his throat. And your father, Marcus Pierce, he murdered her. Madison stopped breathing. What? Lysander let go of her as if she burned him. He turned away, running a hand through his hair, pacing the room like a caged animal. 20 years ago, Celeste was your father's daughter, your half-sister. Marcus promised her to me to seal an alliance. We were mates, true mates. He stopped pacing and looked at the painting, his expression crumbling into grief. But Marcus got greedy. He got a better offer from the Red Fang Syndicate. When Celeste refused to leave me, when she tried to run to me. Lysander's voice dropped to a whisper. They found her body in the gray woods, torn to pieces. Marcus claimed it was Rogue's. But I know he did it to cover his tracks, to sell her to the highest bidder, even in death. He turned back to Madison. The grief was gone, replaced by cold, hard obsidian. I didn't buy you for a wife. Madison, I bought you to serve as a constant, living reminder to your father of what he destroyed. You are my vengeance. Madison slid down the wall to the floor. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Her sister. She had a sister. And her father. You're wrong, she whispered, remembering something strange she had seen in her father's office years ago, a letter from the council. My father is a gambler. Lysander, he's weak. But he loved my mother. He couldn't kill his own child. You think you know him? Lysander scoffed. I saw her body. Did you see who killed her? Madison challenged, standing up on shaky legs. Get out, Lysander commanded, pointing to the door. Lysander. Get out, he bellowed, his roar shaking the glass in the windows. Madison ran. She ran past the covered furniture, past the silver chains, back to the safety of her room. But as she slammed her door shut and locked it, her mind was racing, not with fear, but with a sudden, sharp clarity. Lysander was broken because he believed a lie. And if Madison wanted to survive this marriage, if she wanted to survive him, she had to prove it. She had to find out what really happened to Celeste Moreau. Because in the shadows of the library, right before she ran, she had noticed something Lysander had missed for 20 years. In the painting, Celeste was holding a flower, a white wolfsbane. Wolfsbane didn't grow in the gray woods. It only grew in one place, the gardens of the Supreme Council. Her father didn't kill Celeste. Someone much more powerful did. The silence at breakfast was deafening. Lysander sat at the head of the long mahogany table, nursing a cup of black coffee. He looked exhausted, the shadows under his eyes dark enough to bruise. He hadn't looked at Madison once since she sat down. Madison stared at her plate, her mind replaying the image from the painting, white wolfsbane. She slammed her fork down. The metal clatter echoed like a gunshot in the large room. Lysander didn't flinch. If the food is not to your liking, starve. It's not the food, Madison said, her voice trembling but gaining strength. It's your blindness. Lysander slowly lowered his cup. He turned his gaze toward her. Cold and lethal. Careful. Pet, I'm not in the mood for games today. It wasn't a game in the library. Madison pushed. Standing up, you said my father killed Celeste. You said he staged it to look like rogues. But rogues don't have access to the Supreme Council's private gardens. Lysander's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? The painting, Madison said, walking toward him until she was standing at his side of the table, the flower in her hand. It was white wolfsbane. The petals were translucent. That species only grows in one place, the glass conservatory of Elder Thaddeus. Lysander froze. The air around him crackled with static energy. He stood up slowly, towering over her, his chair scraping loudly against the stone floor. You're lying, he hissed. You're trying to absolve your father. I'm trying to find the truth, Madison yelled back, meeting his glare. My father is a gambler and a coward, Lysander, but he isn't powerful enough to get white wolfsbane. If Celeste was holding that flower, she had been to the council. She knew them. Lysander stared at her for a long, agonizing moment. His chest heaved. He was fighting a war inside his own head, 20 years of hatred, battling against a sliver of logic. Finally, he grabbed her wrist. Come, he growled. Where? To the grave. The drive to the outskirts of the territory was silent. The forest here, the gray woods, was dead. The trees were skeletal, the ground covered in a thick carpet of decaying leaves. It was a place where light didn't dare to touch. Lysander stopped the SUV near a clearing. He got out and walked toward a solitary stone marker beneath a weeping willow. Madison followed, wrapping her coat tighter against the chill. This is where they found her, Lysander said, his voice hollow. He stared at the gravestone. Celeste, beloved. There was no poison in her system, Lysander muttered. She was torn apart by claws, wolf claws. Wolfsbane doesn't have to be ingested to kill a werewolf spirit, Madison said softly. Stepping up beside him, she looked at the ground. It weakens them, makes them unable to shift. If someone wanted to murder an alpha's mate without a fight, they would drug her first. She looked up at him. Did you ever wonder why she didn't shift? Why she didn't fight back? She was an alpha's daughter. She was strong. Lysander closed his eyes. His fists clenched at his sides. A tremor went through his massive frame. She didn't shift, he whispered. a realization dawning on him like a horror story. There were no defensive wounds. She was paralyzed. The pain on his face was raw, stripping away the monster to reveal the grieving man beneath. Madison felt a pang of sympathy in her chest, the mate bond aching for his sorrow. Without thinking, she reached out and touched his arm. Lysander, if she was paralyzed. My father couldn't have done it. He doesn't know alchemy. The council does. Lysander opened his eyes. They weren't amber anymore. They were a glowing, furious gold. If you are right, he rumbled, his voice vibrating with 20 years of misdirected rage, then I have been hunting the wrong prey, and the council has been laughing at me. Crack. A twig snapped in the distance. Lysander's head snapped up. His arm shot out, shoving Madison behind him. Get down, he commanded. From the shadows of the trees, 4 figures emerged. They wore sleek, black tactical gear and silver masks. No pack scent, no sound. Assassins. Well, a distorted voice came from the lead assassin, the beast and his new bride, visiting the old graveyard. How poetic. Who sent you? Lysander snarled, his claws extending, tearing through the tips of his leather gloves. Does it matter? The assassin drew a blade that glowed with a purple rune, poisoned silver. The order is simple. Tie up the loose ends. The girl dies today. They didn't wait. They moved with supernatural speed. 2 lunged for Lysander. 2 blurred past him, heading straight for Madison. Madison, run, Lysander roared. He intercepted the first 2 with a brutal backhand that sent one flying into a tree with the sound of snapping bone. But the assassins were skilled. They coordinated, slashing at his flank with the silver blades. Madison scrambled backward, tripping over a tree root. One of the assassins was on her instantly. He pinned her to the ground, the knife descending toward her throat. She screamed, but the blade never hit. A massive black wolf Lysander, fully shifted, crashed into the assassin, jaws clamping around the attacker's head with a sickening crunch. Lysander ended him. He stood over Madison, growling, blood dripping from his muzzle. He was terrifying, a creature of pure nightmare. But he wasn't attacking her. He was shielding her. The remaining 2 assassins regrouped, realizing they were outmatched by the immortal beast's rage. Retreat, one shouted. They threw a smoke bomb and vanished into the gray mist. Lysander didn't chase them. He shifted back to human form painfully, bones cracking and reshaping until he was a man again, kneeling over her, naked and covered in gore. He grabbed Madison's face with bloody hands, checking her frantically. Did they cut you? He demanded, his breath heaving. Did the silver touch you? Madison shook her head, her heart pounding against her ribs. She stared at him, the blood, the scar, the raw intensity. He had just killed for her. I'm okay, she whispered. Lysander let out a shuddering breath and collapsed forward, resting his forehead against hers. They knew we were here, he rasped. Only the council has satellites that track alpha signatures. You were right. For a moment, in the blood-soaked dirt of the graveyard, the distance between them vanished. There was no contract, no debt, just 2 survivors breathing the same air. Why, Madison asked, her voice trembling. Why does the council want me dead? I'm nobody. Lysander pulled back, his eyes dark. That's what I need to find out. But until I do... He stood up and pulled her to her feet, wiping a smudge of dirt from her cheek. You don't leave my sight, not for a second. Back at the castle, the mood had shifted. It was no longer a prison, it was a bunker. While Callum organized the perimeter defenses, Lysander took Madison to his private study, a room even more secluded than the library. He pulled an ancient leather-bound book from a safe. My family has kept records of bloodlines for centuries, Lysander explained, flipping through the yellowed pages. If Celeste was targeted by the council, and now you are, it has to be genetic. He stopped at a page depicting a family tree, the Pierce lineage. He traced the line up from Marcus. Your father is a standard alpha bloodline, nothing special, Lysander muttered. But your mother's... He looked at Celeste's mother, Marcus's first wife, and then at Madison's mother, Marcus's second wife. They were sisters, Lysander said, his voice dropping. What? No, they weren't. Madison frowned. My mother was from a small pack in the north. Look at the genealogy. Madison. They had different fathers, but the same grandmother. Lysander tapped a name at the top of the tree. Alara Vance. So, Alara Vance was the last known carrier of the Moonblood. Madison stared at him blankly. What is Moonblood? Lysander looked at her, and for the first time, there was fear in his eyes. It's a myth, a legend. They say the Moonblood females have blood so potent it can break any curse. It can amplify an alpha's power 100-fold, or... He hesitated. Or what? Or it can be used in a ritual to grant immortality. Lysander closed the book with a heavy thud. The council didn't kill Celeste because she wouldn't marry Red Fang. They killed her because they tried to extract her blood and failed. She died on the table. He looked at Madison, his gaze intense, possessive, and terrified. And now they know you exist. You have the blood. Madison. That's why you look like her. That's why you feel different. Madison felt cold, so I'm just a walking battery for them. No, Lysander said fiercely. He stepped closer, invading her space, trapping her against the desk. You are mine, he swore, the words rumbling deep in his chest. The debt is canceled. Madison, this isn't about money anymore. This is war. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Callum entered, looking pale. Alpha, Callum said, holding a phone. It's High Elder Thaddeus on the secure line. Lysander's jaw tightened. He put the phone on speaker. Lysander, the Elder's smooth, serpentine voice filled the room. I heard you had some trouble in the woods today. Rogues are getting bold. Cut the act, Thaddeus, Lysander warned. Very well. Thaddeus chuckled darkly. I have a proposition. You want to be free of your curse, the curse that makes you dream of your dead lover every night. Lysander went still. Bring the girl to the Equinox Summit in 3 days. Thaddeus purred. Give us a vial of her blood, just a vial, and we will remove your curse. You can forget Celeste. You can be happy, or keep her, and watch my armies burn nightfall to ash. The line went dead. Madison looked at Lysander. He had a choice. Save his pack and free himself from his torture, or save her. Lysander stared at the phone, his face unreadable. The phone lay in pieces on the hardwood floor, crushed by Lysander's grip. Are you considering it? Madison asked, her voice quiet but steady. She stood by the bookshelf, hugging her arms around her chest. Trading my blood for your peace of mind. Lysander didn't answer immediately. He stared out the window at the encroaching twilight. The muscles in his back were coiled tight, visible through his thin shirt. Thaddeus is offering me the one thing I have wanted for 2 decades, Lysander said low. Sleep without nightmares, a heart that doesn't bleed for a ghost. And all it costs is me, Madison said bitterly. Lysander turned. His expression was thunderous. Do not presume to know the cost. Madison, the council doesn't make deals. They set traps. He walked past her, his scent of storm and pine enveloping her. Go to the gym, he commanded. If you are to be bait, you need to have teeth. The private gym was located in the converted dungeon stone walls, cold floors, and heavy mats. Lysander didn't go easy on her. For an hour, he pushed her to exhaustion. Run, dodge, strike. Faster, he barked. As Madison swung a clumsy fist at him, he caught it easily, twisting her arm behind her back and slamming her chest against the mat. You're hesitant, Lysander growled, his body pressing her into the floor. "You're afraid to hurt me. Stop being a girl and be a wolf." "I'm human," Madison screamed, struggling against his weight. "I haven't shifted yet." "But the blood is there, call to it." He flipped her over. Suddenly, Madison was on her back, breathing heavy, sweat slicking her skin. Lysander straddled her hips, pinning her wrists above her head with one large hand. The sparring stopped. The silence rushed back in, heavy and thick. Lysander looked down at her. His hair was messy, sticking to his forehead. His chest heaved against hers. The position was intimate, dominating, and incredibly compromising. Madison's heart hammered, not from exertion, but from the sudden awareness of his hardness against her soft thigh. "Let me go," she whispered, though her voice lacked conviction. Lysander didn't move. His gaze dropped to her mouth, then lower, to the pulse fluttering wildly in her neck. "You fight like her," he murmured, almost to himself, "but you smell better, sweet, like vanilla and rain." He lowered his head. His nose brushed the sensitive skin behind her ear, inhaling deeply. Madison arched her back involuntarily, a small gasp escaping her lips. The sound seemed to snap something in Lysander. His grip on her wrists tightened. He ground his hips down, a friction that sent a jolt of liquid heat straight to Madison's core. "Do you know what it does to me?" he rasped against her skin. "Having you here, smelling you. Knowing the bond wants me to rip these clothes off and claim you until you forget your own name." Madison's breath hitched. "Then do it," she challenged, surprised by her own boldness. "Or are you too afraid of the ghost?" Lysander froze. The amber in his eyes swirled with conflict. He pulled back abruptly, standing up and leaving her cold and empty on the mat. "Go to the bathhouse," he ordered, his voice rough. "Clean up, we have work to do." The bathhouse was a cavern of black marble and steam. A natural hot spring fed the massive pool in the center of the room. Madison sank into the scalding water, letting it soothe her bruised muscles. The steam was so thick she couldn't see the far wall. She closed her eyes, floating, trying to wash away the confusion. "He wants me. I know he does. So why does he stop?" The water rippled. Madison's eyes snapped open. Lysander was wading into the pool. He was naked. Madison panicked, sinking lower until the water covered her chin. He was magnificent, all corded muscle, scars, and raw masculinity. The water lapped at his waist as he moved toward her. "Relax," he said, his voice echoing in the stone chamber. "I'm not here to ravage you. The hot spring helps with the pain." He sat on the underwater bench opposite her. He closed his eyes, tilting his head back. "What pain?" Madison asked, her curiosity overriding her shyness. Lysander opened one eye. "The curse Thaddeus placed on me. It's not just emotional. Madison, it feels like silver burning through my veins every time I try to let go of the past. Every time I feel desire for someone else." Madison softened. "Is that why you stopped in the gym? Because it hurt?" "Because if I start, I won't stop. And you deserve better than a lover who is in agony while he touches you." Madison moved through the water. It was a brave move. She stopped right in front of him. The water was clear enough that she could see the outline of his body, just as he could see hers. "Does it hurt now?" she whispered. "Yes," he admitted, his jaw tightening. "Let me help." Madison reached out. She placed her wet hands on the scar tissue covering his chest, the physical mark of the curse. Lysander hissed, his muscles jumping under her touch. "Madison." "Shh." She traced the jagged lines. As her fingers moved, a strange thing happened. Her hands began to glow with a faint, silvery light, the moonblood responding to the curse. Lysander groaned, his head falling forward to rest on her shoulder. The pain, it's receding." For the first time in 20 years, the burning stopped. Madison wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him closer, their wet bodies pressed together skin on skin, slick and hot. Lysander's hands found her waist, gripping her possessively. He kissed her neck, open-mouthed and desperate, tasting the water and salt on her skin. "You are the cure," he groaned against her throat, "not the blood ritual. You." He lifted her, seating her on his lap underwater. The sensation was electric. Madison wrapped her legs around his waist, the intimacy overwhelming. "Lysander," she breathed, running her fingers through his damp hair. He kissed her, then really kissed her. It was bruising and deep, a kiss of starvation. His tongue swept into her mouth, claiming her, while his hands roamed over her slippery back, pulling her flush against him. It was euphoria. It was right. But then he pulled back, resting his forehead against hers, both of them gasping for air in the steam-filled room. "I can't," he said, his voice strained. "Not yet." "Why?" "Because if we consummate the bond now, while the curse is still active, it might kill you. The backlash of energy, it's too dangerous." He kissed her nose, a tender gesture that made her heart ache. "But soon," he promised, "once Thaddeus is dead." Later, wrapped in robes, they sat by the fire in the library. "I need to tell you the truth about the offer," Lysander said, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "You're not going to trade me." "Never," Lysander said fiercely. "But Thaddeus didn't ask for a vial. Madison, that was code." He pulled a scroll from the shelf. "The ritual of the eclipsed heart. It requires the entire exsanguination of a moonblood carrier to remove my curse and grant me peace. You would have to be drained dry." Madison went pale. "So he wants to kill me." "He wants to kill you to power himself," Lysander corrected. "If he gets your blood, he becomes invincible. He becomes a god." Lysander tossed the scroll into the fire. He watched it burn. "So, we are going to the summit. We are going to accept his invitation." "Are we insane?" Madison asked. Lysander turned to her, a wicked, predatory grin spreading across his face, the grin of the beast she had first seen at the auction. "No, we are going to use the one thing he doesn't know about." "Which is?" "The moonblood is volatile," Lysander explained. "If it is taken by force, it grants power, but if it is given freely, by a mate, mixed with wolfsbane, it becomes a bomb." Madison finished the thought, her eyes widening. "Exactly." Lysander nodded. "You are going to act as the victim. You will let him think he has won, and when he tries to drink—" "We blow him to hell," Madison whispered. "Together," Lysander said, taking her hand and kissing her knuckles. "We end this together." She was about to become a living weapon, a poisoned chalice, but a plan like this, a plan built on sacrifice and lies, can it truly succeed? Before we step into the viper's nest, let me know what you predict in the comments. Do you think Lysander's gambit will work, or is this a trap for them both? The vial sat on the vanity table, shimmering with a lethal, violet hue, liquid wolfsbane, concentrated. Madison stared at it. Her reflection in the mirror was pale, her eyes wide. She was dressed for war, though her armor was a floor-length gown of blood-red silk, cut low in the back, designed to distract. Lysander stood behind her, his hands gripping her shoulders so tightly his knuckles were white. He was fully suited in black tie, looking every inch the aristocratic monster the world believed him to be. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice ragged. "We can fight our way out. We can run." "And be hunted for the rest of our lives." Madison shook her head. She picked up the vial. "Tell me what it will feel like." Lysander didn't lie. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling her scent as if it were the last time. "It will feel like ice in your veins. It will numb your extremities. Your heart rate will drop until you appear comatose. But your mind will remain awake, trapped in a paralyzing chill." "Will I die?" Not if I get the antidote to you within an hour of him drinking your blood. He kissed the sensitive spot below her ear. I won't let you die. Madison, I would burn the world first. I trust you, she whispered. She uncorked the vial and downed it in one gulp. The reaction was instant. Madison gasped, clutching her throat. It tasted like bitter ash and metallic ozone. A wave of cold, darker than any winter, swept through her chest. Her knees buckled. Lysander caught her before she hit the floor. He swept her into his arms, carrying her to the chaise lounge. It's starting, he murmured, stroking her hair. Focus on my voice. Focus on the bond. Madison shivered violently. Her vision blurred. She felt her limbs getting heavy, responding slower to her commands. But through the freezing fog in her mind, she felt the burning heat of Lysander's hand on her cheek. I'm cold, she slurred. I know. Baby, I know. Lysander lay down beside her, pulling her red-clad body on top of his, wrapping his large frame around her to share his alpha heat. Draw from me. Take my warmth. They lay there for 20 minutes until the shivering stopped and the false calm set in. The poison was in her blood now. She was a living weapon. The Equinox Summit was held at the Zenith Tower, a glass skyscraper in the center of the neutral city. Neutral in name only. It was the council's stronghold. The limousine ride was tense. Madison leaned against Lysander, her movements languid, artificially sedated by the wolfsbane. To an outsider, she looked submissive, broken, perfect for the role. They entered the grand ballroom. It was a display of obscene wealth, crystal chandeliers, gold-leafed pillars, and hundreds of the world's most powerful werewolves in designer couture. The air smelled of expensive perfume covering the musk of predators. When Lysander entered with Madison on his arm, the room went silent. The beast has arrived, someone whispered. And he brought the girl. Lysander's face was a mask of boredom. He walked through the crowd, parting the sea of alphas like a shark moving through a school of fish. He kept a possessive hand on the small of Madison's back, guiding her, but also holding her up as the poison sapped her strength. Steady, he breathed into her ear. Thaddeus is at the balcony. 12 o'clock. Madison looked up. Standing on the mezzanine, holding a champagne flute, was High Elder Thaddeus. He was an elderly man with silver hair and a grandfatherly smile that didn't reach his dead, shark-like eyes. He raised his glass to them. They were summoned to the VIP section. Thaddeus was surrounded by his elite guard massive wolves with silver-plated armor. Lysander, Thaddeus smiled. Stepping forward, he ignored Lysander's outstretched hand and looked straight at Madison, and the lovely Madison. Or should I say, the vessel. Madison lowered her eyes, playing the part. Elder, she whispered weakly. Thaddeus stepped into her personal space. He reached out with a withered hand and stroked her cheek. His skin felt like dry parchment. Lysander growled a low, involuntary rumble in his chest. Thaddeus laughed. Control yourself, boy. You brought her here to trade. Didn't you freedom from your curse in exchange for her essence? Lysander clenched his jaw, looking pained. I can't sleep. Thaddeus, the nightmares of Celeste, they are killing me. Take the girl. Just give me the cure. It was an Oscar-worthy performance. He sounded broken, selfish. Thaddeus's eyes gleamed with triumph. Wise choice. Sentimentality is a weakness an alpha cannot afford. He grabbed Madison's chin, forcing her to look at him. He sniffed the air around her neck. She smells faint. Thaddeus frowned. Madison's heart stopped. Does he smell the wolfsbane? She is terrified, Lysander interjected smoothly, stepping closer. And I sedated her for the trip. She fought me. Thaddeus chuckled. Of course she did. Spirit, I like that. It makes the blood sweeter. He turned to his guards. Prepare the ritual room. We begin at midnight." He leaned in to whisper in Madison's ear, "Don't worry, my dear. It will hurt, but only for a moment. Then you will be part of me forever." As Thaddeus walked away, Madison felt a wave of nausea. The wolfsbane was working too well. Her vision was starting to tunnel. "Stay with me." Lysander squeezed her hand, transmitting a surge of energy through the bond. Almost there. The ballroom was suffocating. Lysander led Madison to a quieter corner near the terrace doors to get fresh air. "He bought it," Madison whispered, leaning her head on Lysander's chest. "He's going to drink." "And then I will rip his head off," Lysander promised, his eyes scanning the room for threats. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the main entrance, shouting, the sound of glass breaking. "Let me in, I need to see her, she's my daughter." Madison froze. She knew that voice. Security guards were dragging a disheveled man into the hall. His tuxedo was rumpled, his face red from alcohol and desperation. Marcus Pierce. Dad Madison gasped, pushing off Lysander's chest. Marcus saw her. His eyes widened. He broke free from the guards with surprising strength and stumbled toward them. The crowd parted, murmuring. "Madison," Marcus yelled, pointing a shaking finger at Lysander. "Get away from him! It's a trap!" Lysander stepped in front of Madison, his posture shifting to combat readiness. "Marcus, you're drunk. Go home." No, Marcus fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't know. Maddie, I swear I didn't know." He looked up at the balcony where Thaddeus was watching with amusement. "Thaddeus," Marcus screamed, "you lied to me. You said if I gave you the girl, you'd resurrect Celeste. You said you had the technology." The room gasped. Madison stared at her father. Resurrect Celeste. That was the deal. He hadn't sold her for money. He had sold her because he was deluded enough to think the council could bring back the dead. "He is insane," Thaddeus called out from the balcony, his voice bored. "Remove him." "Wait," Marcus scrambled up, pulling a small, crude detonator from his pocket. He ripped open his jacket. Strapped to his chest were blocks of C4 explosives. Screams erupted. The alphas in the room shifted, chaos breaking out. "Nobody touches her," Marcus sobbed. "I won't let you kill my second daughter, too. I'm taking us all out." Lysander cursed. "The idiot is going to blow the building before we can kill Thaddeus." "Dad!" "No," Madison screamed, stepping out from behind Lysander. "Don't." The poison in her system made her slow. She stumbled toward her father. Marcus looked at her, his eyes full of love and madness. "I'm saving you. Maddie, forgive me." He pressed the button. Click. Nothing happened. Marcus clicked it again. Frantic. Click, click. From the balcony, Thaddeus laughed. It was a cold, dry sound. He held up a small device, a signal jammer. "Did you really think," Thaddeus sneered, "that you could bring electronics into my tower? Marcus, pathetic." Thaddeus gestured to his guards. "Kill him." 3 guards lunged. "No," Madison screamed. Before Lysander could stop her, she threw herself forward, but the wolfsbane made her weak. She didn't reach Marcus. She watched as a guard's claws swiped across Marcus's throat. Her father fell. Blood pooled on the marble floor, staining the white stone red, matching Madison's dress. The room spun. The shock, combined with the poison, was too much. Madison collapsed. As darkness took her, the last thing she felt was Lysander catching her, and his roar of pure, unadulterated fury, shaking the foundations of the tower. "I will kill you all." And then the world went black. Madison's consciousness was a flickering candle in a hurricane. She could hear sounds, screams, the crunch of bone, the heavy thud of bodies hitting the floor, but she couldn't move. The wolfsbane had paralyzed her motor functions. She felt herself being lifted, not by Lysander's warm, hard arms, but by rough hands clad in metal gauntlets. Let her go. Lysander's roar was deafening, a sound of pure animalistic agony. Through her half-lidded eyes, Madison saw him. He was surrounded by 20 of Thaddeus's elite guards. He had already killed 5 of them. Their broken bodies lay at his feet, but they had silver spears pointed at his chest, his throat, his eyes. And one guard held a blade to Madison's neck. "Stand down," Lysander Thaddeus commanded, stepping over Marcus's cooling body without a glance, "or I open her throat right here. No ritual, just waste." Lysander froze. His chest heaved, his suit shredded, blood not his own soaking his shirt. He looked at Madison limp, pale, her red dress trailing on the floor like a pool of blood. If he fought, she died. He dropped his claws. He fell to his knees. "Don't hurt her," Lysander begged, a sound so broken it shattered Madison's heart. "I yield. Take me, just don't hurt her." "Chain him," Thaddeus ordered, "and bring the girl to the spire." The top floor of the Zenith Tower was an open-air ritual site. The wind whipped violently, carrying the scent of impending storm. In the center stood a stone altar carved with ancient runes that glowed with a sick, green light. Madison was laid upon the cold stone. She was numb, but her mind was screaming, "Get up, fight, the poison is ready." Lysander was dragged in. Heavy silver chains bound to his wrists and ankles, burning his skin with a constant hiss. They forced him to his knees 10 feet away, forcing him to watch. Thaddeus stood over Madison. He had stripped off his tuxedo jacket, rolling up his sleeves. He held a ceremonial obsidian dagger. "Do you know why I wanted the moonblood?" Child Thaddeus asked. Stroking Madison's hair, she couldn't flinch away. "Immortality," she whispered, her lips barely moving. "Evolution," Thaddeus corrected. "Werewolves are stagnant. We are beasts tied to the moon. But with your blood, I will become a hybrid, a creature that needs no moon. I will be a god." He looked at Lysander. "Watch closely, beast. See your legacy end." Thaddeus raised the dagger. He didn't aim for her heart. He sliced a long, shallow cut across her palm. "I must drink from the source while the heart still beats," Thaddeus muttered, his eyes blackening with greed. He lifted Madison's bleeding hand to his mouth. Lysander struggled against the chains, the silver burning into his flesh, smoke rising from his wrists. No, Thaddeus. It was the perfect acting. Thaddeus believed Lysander was terrified of losing her. He didn't know Lysander was terrified of when the poison would kick in. Thaddeus clamped his mouth over Madison's wound. He sucked greedily. Madison closed her eyes. "Take it," she thought. "Drink the death." She felt the suction, the violation of it. Thaddeus drank deep, swallowing mouthfuls of her wolfsbane-laced moonblood. For a minute, there was only the sound of the wind and Thaddeus's wet swallowing. Then, Thaddeus pulled back, gasping. A look of euphoria crossed his face. "Power," he whispered, his skin beginning to glow. "I can feel it. Limitless." He laughed, throwing his head back. But the laugh turned into a gurgle. Thaddeus grabbed his throat. The glow in his skin turned from white to a sickly, necrotic purple. He stumbled back from the altar, coughing violently. "What?" Thaddeus wheezed. Black blood sprayed from his lips onto the white floor. "What is this?" "It's judgment," Lysander said softly. The fear was gone from his face, replaced by cold, hard satisfaction. Thaddeus fell to his knees, clawing at his chest. The wolfsbane, mixed with the potent moon blood, wasn't just poisoning him, it was actively rejecting his biology. His veins bulged black against his skin. His eyes began to bleed. "You poisoned the vessel!" Thaddeus choked out, looking at Madison with horror. "I told you," Madison whispered, finding the strength to turn her head. "I'm not a vessel. I'm a weapon." "Guards," Thaddeus shrieked, his voice bubbling with blood. "Kill them!" But the guards hesitated. Their leader was dissolving before their eyes. Lysander didn't hesitate. With a roar that shook the glass walls of the tower, he pulled against the silver chains. His muscles swelled, tearing his shirt. The adrenaline of the moment, combined with the pure alpha rage, gave him hysterical strength. Snap! The chain on his right wrist broke. He swung the loose metal like a whip, taking the head off the nearest guard. Chaos erupted. Lysander was a whirlwind of violence. He tore through the confused guards, ignoring the silver spears that grazed his ribs. He had one goal, the altar. He reached Madison. She was convulsing now. The plan had worked, but the antidote was in Lysander's jacket pocket, and his jacket had been torn off and lost in the fight downstairs. No, no, no. Lysander panicked, patting his shredded shirt. Madison. He gathered her into his arms. She was freezing cold. Her heart was beating so slowly it was almost a pause between thuds. Lysander, she gasped, her eyes rolling back. Cold. Stay with me. Lysander looked around. No jacket, no antidote. Thaddeus lay dead a few feet away, a twisted husk. The remaining guards had fled. Lysander looked down at her. The wolfsbane was shutting down her organs. If he didn't filter it out, she would die in minutes. I have to take it, he said, realization dawning on him. What? The bond, Lysander said frantically. I can filter the poison through my system. My alpha blood is stronger. I can take the hit. It will kill you, she whispered. Then I die happy. He didn't wait for permission. He brought his wrist to his mouth and bit down hard, severing his own vein. Blood welled up, hot and dark. He pressed his bleeding wrist to her lips. Drink, Madison, take my life. She tried to turn away, but he forced her, drink. Instinct took over. She swallowed. His blood was like liquid fire, scorching down her throat. Then, he leaned down and sealed his mouth over the cut on her palm, the same one Thaddeus had used. But Lysander didn't drink to take. He drank to cleanse. He sucked the poison out of her system, absorbing the wolfsbane into his own body. Madison felt the cold recede, replaced by the burning heat of Lysander's essence flooding her. But as she grew stronger, he grew paler. He pulled back, coughing, his own lips turning slightly blue. He spat out the poisoned blood, but enough had entered his system to stagger him. Lysander Madison sat up, her strength returning miraculously. He fell back against the altar, sweating, shaking. I'm okay, just dizzy. He looked at her, his eyes half closed. You're alive. Madison crawled over to him, weeping. She cradled his large head in her lap. You idiot. You absorbed the poison. Worth it, he mumbled, reaching up to touch her face. Suddenly, the air in the tower shifted. The runes on the altar, which had gone dark when Thaddeus died, flared to life again. But this time, they weren't green. They were silver. Madison's palm, where Lysander had drank, began to glow. Lysander's wrist, where Madison had drank, began to glow. The blood exchange, the sacrifice, the wolfsbane, it had triggered something ancient. A voice echoed not in the room, but inside their heads. It was a woman's voice, soft, sad, powerful. The debt is paid, the cycle is broken. Madison gasped. Celeste. Lysander's eyes snapped open. The blue tint of poison faded from his lips instantly. The wounds on his chest closed. The energy radiating from him wasn't just alpha power anymore. It was something divine. He sat up, staring at his hands. The curse, he whispered, looking at Madison with wide eyes. It's gone. Completely gone. He looked at the empty space where the ghost of Celeste used to haunt him. Silence. Peace. But then he looked at Madison, and the look was different. It wasn't the look of a man seeing a ghost. It was the look of a man seeing his wife. "You broke it," he said, his voice filled with awe, not with death, with sacrifice. He pulled her into a crushing kiss, blood, sweat, tears, and victory mingling together. It wasn't gentle. It was a claim. "Let's go home, Luna," he growled against her lips. They left the tower burning behind them. In the limousine stolen from Thaddeus's fleet, Madison finally let herself cry for her father. Lysander held her, silent and solid as a rock, letting her grief wash over him. But as they crossed the border back into Nightfall territory, Madison looked out the window. The moon was full, and for the first time in 20 years, the fog over the castle had lifted. Lysander took her hand. His skin was warm. He was alive. "What happens now?" Madison asked, wiping her eyes. Lysander brought her hand to his lips, kissing the scar on her palm. "Now," he said, his eyes gleaming with a promise of things to come, "we bury your father like a hero, and then I take you to the East Wing." "The East Wing, why?" "Because," Lysander smiled, a genuine, breathtaking smile that transformed his face. "I need to burn a painting. And I need to show you the bedroom I prepared for you 20 years ago, for the day my true mate would arrive." Madison's heart skipped a beat. "I thought that room was for Celeste." "No," Lysander said intensely. "Celeste was my past. You are my future, and tonight the contract ends and the marriage begins." The rain at Blackthorn Manor was usually cold and unforgiving. Today, it felt like a baptism. In the center of the pack's sacred burial grounds, a massive pyre of oak and cedar roared against the gray sky. On top of it lay the body of Marcus Pierce. The entire Nightfall pack was in attendance. 3 days ago, they would have spat on Marcus's name. Today, they stood in respectful silence, heads bowed. Madison stood at the front, dressed in black, holding a single torch. Her face was pale, her eyes dry. She had cried all her tears in the limousine. Now, she just felt a hollow ache. Lysander stood beside her. He wasn't wearing a suit. He wore the traditional leather armor of a pack alpha. He placed a heavy hand on Madison's shoulder. "He didn't die a gambler," Lysander's voice projected over the crowd, deep and resonant. "He died a father. He died a warrior who took down a tyrant. Let his debt be cleared. Let his name be spoken with honor in Nightfall." The pack howled a mournful, haunting sound that rose to the clouds. Lysander nodded to Madison. She stepped forward and lowered the torch. The wood caught instantly. "Goodbye, Dad," she whispered as the flames engulfed him. "You're free." As the smoke rose, Madison felt the weight of her past burning away with him. She wasn't the daughter of a failure anymore. She was the daughter of a hero. Lysander wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her into his side. He didn't care who was watching. "Come," he murmured against her temple. "The dead have their peace. Now the living must find theirs." They didn't go to the master suite. Lysander led her straight to the East Wing. He kicked the doors open. He didn't unlock them. He broke the lock. The silver chains clattered to the floor. Useless trash. They walked into the dusty library where the painting of Celeste still hung the shrine that had haunted Lysander for 20 years. Madison stopped in front of it. "You said you wanted to show me something." "I do," Lysander said. He walked to the fireplace and stoked the embers until a fire roared in the grate. Then, he turned to the painting. He grabbed the heavy frame with both hands. "Lysander." He ripped it off the wall. Plaster cracked. Dust flew. He carried the massive portrait to the fireplace. He looked at Celeste's beautiful, frozen face one last time. There was no hatred in his eyes, but no longing either. Just a quiet, final goodbye. "I release you," he said softly, "and I release myself." He thrust the painting into the fire. Madison watched as the canvas blackened. the lavender field, the white dress, the face that looked so much like hers it all curled and vanished into ash. Lysander turned to face her. The firelight danced behind him, casting him in a warm, golden glow. He looked lighter, younger. "I told you that you looked like her," Lysander said, walking toward Madison until he was crowding her space. "I was wrong." He reached out, his thumb tracing her lower lip. She was a memory of innocence. "You—" His eyes darkened with intensity. "You are fire. You are survival. You are the woman who walked into hell to save a monster." "I didn't save a monster," Madison whispered, placing her hands on his chest, feeling his steady heartbeat. "I saved my mate." Lysander groaned, a sound torn from his soul. He scooped her up into his arms, bridal style. "Bedroom," he growled. "Now." This time, the door to the master suite didn't lock with an ominous thud. It clicked shut, sealing out the world, leaving only the two of them. Lysander didn't put her on the bed immediately. He stood her down in the center of the room. The air was thick with the scent of rain, arousal, and the newly purified bond snapping into place. "No rules," Lysander said, his voice rough. "No contracts, no duty." He stepped back, holding his arms out. "If you want this, if you want me, you have to take the first step. You have to choose this, Madison." It was the ultimate surrender of control for an alpha like him. He was giving her the power. Madison didn't hesitate. She stepped forward. Her trembling hands reached for the buttons of his shirt. "I choose you," she whispered. "I choose the beast." She pushed the shirt off his shoulders. He was magnificent, a landscape of muscle and scars. The burn mark over his heart, the scar of the curse, had faded to a faint white line. She leaned in and kissed that faded scar. Lysander shuddered, his hands gripping her hips, his claws extending slightly, pricking the fabric of her dress. "My turn," he rasped. He spun her around. The zipper of her black funeral dress hissed as he lowered it. The fabric pooled at her feet. She stood before him in black lace, her skin glowing like pearl in the moonlight. Lysander inhaled sharply. God. He lifted her onto the massive bed. He crawled over her, covering her body with his. This wasn't the rough, desperate energy of the bathhouse. This was deliberate, reverent. "Look at me," he commanded softly. Madison looked up into his amber eyes. They weren't empty anymore. They were overflowing with emotion. "The first time I marked you, I hurt you," he said, his fingers brushing the scar on her shoulder. "I did it to own you." He lowered his head, his lips hovering over the mark. "Tonight," he whispered against her skin, "I do it to belong to you." He kissed the mark gently, soothing the old memory. Then he moved lower. Their lovemaking was slow, intense, and drowning in sensation. Every touch was electric, amplified by the moonblood in Madison's veins. When their skin touched, faint silver light traced the points of contact. When he finally entered her, Madison gasped, arching her back. It felt different. The bond, which had been a jagged, painful tether, suddenly smoothed out. It became a river of golden light connecting their minds. "I love you." She heard his thought in her head. It wasn't spoken. It was felt. "I love you," she projected back. Lysander moved with a rhythm that stole her breath, driving them both toward the edge. He wasn't taking from her. He was worshiping her. And Madison met him, match for match, wrapping her legs around him, anchoring him to the earth as they shattered together. As the climax hit, Lysander threw his head back and roared a sound of pure triumph that echoed through the stone castle. Sunlight streamed through the balcony doors. Madison woke up tangled in silk sheets in Lysander's limbs. His heavy arm was draped over her waist, holding her even in sleep. She watched him for a moment. He looked peaceful. The lines of tension that had defined his face for weeks were gone. He stirred, sensing her gaze. One amber eye opened. "Stop staring," he grumbled, though a lazy smile tugged at his lips. "I'm inspecting my property," Madison teased, running a hand down his arm. Lysander chuckled a deep, rumbling sound. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "The council is in chaos," he murmured. "The reality of the world creeping back in, with Thaddeus dead. The power vacuum will be violent. They will come for us, eventually." "Let them come," Madison said, surprising herself with her own fierceness. She looked at her palm. The scar from the ritual was still there, a thin white line. "We have the moon blood, we have the nightfall pack, and we have the truth about Celeste." Lysander propped himself up on one elbow. He looked at her with serious eyes. "You're right, but we need to build something stronger than a fortress. We need to build a legacy." He placed his large hand flat on her stomach. It was a possessive, instinctive gesture. Madison's breath hitched. She felt a strange warmth where his hand rested not from him, but from within her. A tiny, sparking ember of energy that hadn't been there yesterday. Lysander's eyes widened. He felt it too. The wolfsbane hadn't sterilized her. The magical backlash had sparked something new. "Madison," he whispered, his voice filled with wonder. "Is that—" A new heartbeat, Lysander confirmed, his face pale with awe. Faint, just a spark. But it's there. Madison covered his hand with hers. A baby, a child created from a bond that defied death, poison, and curses. "A new start," she whispered. Lysander leaned down and kissed her forehead, then her lips, and finally, he pressed a reverent kiss to her stomach. "You are not a debt," he vowed, looking up at her with fierce devotion. "You are my queen, and this," he stroked her stomach, "is the first of a new breed." 6 months later, the castle was no longer dark. The drapes were open. The east wing was being renovated into a nursery. Madison stood on the balcony, watching the sunset over the forest. She was visibly pregnant now, glowing with health and power. Callum walked onto the balcony, bowing low. "Alpha, Luna, the envoys from the Northern Territories are here. They want to swear allegiance." Lysander stepped up behind Madison, wrapping his arms around her swollen belly. He rested his chin on her shoulder. "Tell them to wait," Lysander said lazily. "My wife is watching the sunset." "Lysander, we should go," Madison laughed, leaning back into him. "Let them wait," he murmured, biting her ear gently. "I waited 20 years for this view. I'm not looking away now." Madison smiled, looking out at the horizon. She had been sold as a slave, bought as a tool for revenge, and nearly sacrificed on an altar of greed. But as she stood in the arms of the beast who adored her, carrying the future of their race, she knew one thing for sure. She was no one's victim. She was Madison Kane, and she was finally home.